a collection of the stuff I have found in the trash and in the garbage that people have given to me. This was a tray I think I got a gift in some time ago. I spray painted all of these with a primer in order for the paint just to stick easily. You can always do your first coat as a primer coat, but I find the spray primer on metal helps. I have these primed with a quick spray primer, and again I did this because it just speeds up the process. You can do what I call a primer coat with any of the DIY paints. It has a clay base so it'll stick to anything. I like to do this on metal and plastic just because I will end up using less paint and it saves me time. Always spray paint outside. I like to find stuff in the trash even when I'm traveling. This is up in Tahoe, California. I always like to start with a little water. I'm using the new color Flirtatious. This is the clay base. It's highly pigmented. I'm only gonna need a little bit of paint. I'm using the Little Dipper brush. I love this brush because it gets in all the little contours. It's small for small projects and details. I'm using vintage linen on these trays, and then we're going to move on and use the IOD paint inlay. Does it look like I live in the country? Those are goats. I actually live in a city, but in the area I'm in, there was a golf course that is no longer being run, so to keep the grass down, we have goats. It's pretty funny to watch. This is the new IOD paint inlay for the spring 2025. This one is called Spring Melody. It's one of 2 inlays that they released, and they are both amazing. And if you can tell, I like pink. It's my first time using it. On the back, you can see all of the sheets that it has. But what I'm really interested in are these huge roses. Oh my goodness, I cannot wait to try these. So I'm gonna put these in this little wood tray. If you're not familiar with inlays, I highly encourage you to try them. This is actually paint on this paper. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna re-wet it, and we're gonna re-wet with paint on this, or you can use liquid patina. You need a medium, a carrier to like grab that paint, and then it embeds into it and it looks like you painted it yourself. So let's get started. When using the inlays, prepare your surface by making sure there's a fresh coat of paint or liquid patina. Lightly spritz both sides of it. It kind of gets that paint moving. Once you put it down, go straight down. Don't move it again, because once it hits your wet paint, it's activated. I'm going to then spray the top of it. You want it to be completely wet, and you want to make sure that you're going to allow it to totally dry before you pick it up again. So here I am just laying it down, using my fingers to kind of get into the areas. If you like to decoupage, you can use a piece of wadded up saran wrap or plastic wrap to really smooth it in. You want to make sure that all pieces of that inlay that have paint on them are making contact with your wet paint. I'm going to repeat and do the same thing on this little metal tray I painted also with DIY paint Flirtatious. Now for this large round tray, I'm using the new IOD paint inlay from the spring 2025 release, Portofino and vintage linen. I already have one coat on there. I'm gonna go ahead and put one more coat. I'm using the multitasker brush. This is a fantastic brush for big projects and for things with big round surfaces or curves. I love the multitasker really for dressers, all kinds of big things. It seems to be covering really well on this tray. You wanna make sure that you have that wet coat of paint available for when you put the inlay down. So I'm just gonna get all around the entire piece here. Don't miss this important tip that's coming up. Sometimes a piece of the paintbrush or a pet hair might get into your paint. If you just use the edge of your paintbrush to pick up, go sideways and pick it up with the bristles, you can easily get it out of that wet paint. So I have put down my next coat of wet paint on this tray, and I'm using the lemons from the Portofino paint inlay. And I have to take a moment on where I place them just to make sure I like where it's going. So sometimes you can just hover over your piece before you decide, because once you put it down, remember that paint's going to activate and you do not want to move it again. Did I mention I like dumpster diving? Pretty much everything in this garage was found for free. If you have any ideas on what to do with any of this stuff, please leave me a comment with your ideas of how to make it over. I have a lot. Let's use the big part of the Portofino inlay. I'm putting the wet paint down. Now I'm going to lightly mist both sides. This big inlay, fitting it into this small space is a little tricky, so go slowly if you're doing something like this. I got it where I want it. I'm so excited. Now I'm going to totally wet down the outside. I'm using a damp paper towel to really make sure that all pieces, all the details are stuck. I pulled out the spring florals, the roses, and I'm gonna let it dry. Look how gorgeous they are. And I set those aside because you can use them up to 3 times the inlays. They're not a one and done. So set them aside, let them dry. Now we're gonna do the sponge tray. When we get ready to pull it up, you need to re-wet the inlay. So this is where having one of these continuous misters is really, really helpful. Re-wet. And wish me luck because this was a really big one and it could be tricky. Okay, you ready for this? It's like magic. You just pull slowly and straight up. You're not pulling up a transfer, you're pulling up an inlay. So there is a little bit of cracking in there where I didn't get it quite straight, but I feel like adds to kind of an antique-y look there, and I will touch up just a little bit, but how cool is that? Now, there's a lot of paint left on this still, so I love this. This is a really big one. I'm gonna set it aside and let it dry. Now, let's see how the lemons did for the Portofino inlay. I'm slowly peeling that back. I am gonna set that aside because I wanna use those lemons again. Back to the other inlay, the spring inlay. I am using one of the sheets that has these gorgeous blossoms. It looks like a toile to me, so I'm just kind of dry fitting it around the tray now. I'm going to use liquid patina for my carrier for this one. One thing to remember, if you're using liquid patina, do not allow it to dry completely. You want to pull up your inlay when it's still a little bit damp. The transfer will usually stick quite well, the inlay will stick quite well with the liquid patina, but if you allow it to completely dry and harden, you're basically just securing your inlay, the paper and all, to your piece. Try both processes. I go back and forth. So you can see I have a lot of books, but sometimes I like to paint them. I'm going to talk about why it's okay to paint them in just a minute. I have tons of these little books. I got them from a friend that shops estate sales and they were going in the trash. All of the people who are upset that I am painting a book, they were going in the trash. Now that we got that out of the way, this is a great way to save books. Do you know how many times I have found books in the garbage? And these are old, so they have like still readable. I didn't take the pages out. Did you know that books are thrown out by the tons and the millions every year because publishers overpublish and then they just end up in a landfill? The next time you perhaps feel upset that someone is upcycling a book, just remember it was going in the trash. I am going to use this new Lost Garden transfer. This is from the spring release by Norca Design. You can find it online or you can get it locally if you're local to me in Brentwood, California at Artisan Peacock, the super cool news store. It has a whole bunch of artisans under one roof. These are all these gorgeous flowers. I think they will look gorgeous on this little book, so I'm going to show how to use transfer on it and we'll move on. This is my new space where you can get DIY paint and IOD locally in Brentwood, California at the streets of Brentwood. Transfers work best when you have a really smooth and dry surface. I'm lightly sanding this with 320 grit sandpaper. The gridded lines on the transfers make it really easy to figure out where you want to put your piece. I decided what flowers I want. I'm going to line it up with my book to make sure it fits, and then I'm going to use those gridded lines to help guide where I want to cut. Right, I've removed the sticky back from the transfer and I'm using the enclosed burnishing stick, and you just want to gently lift up that plastic and press at the same time. You can see how it's sticking and you just want to turn it over and just give it a quick light rub when you're done. I'm going to do the spine of it now because I always feel like more is more when it comes to do transfers, and I want to show what happens if you mess up. So I realized the book is super soft. Not all of the transfer stuck because the book cover is so soft, so I just went ahead and used more parts of the transfer to go over what didn't stick, and now you can't even tell. I love it. The transfer's in place. I want to put some wax on this because I want to add a nice soft finish and make it look old. So from the time I started this video, the stuff in my garage grew. I cleaned out a space at my old co-op and moved to a really cool new store all for local makers and artisans called Artisan Peacock. I think somebody needs to send help. This is getting scary. One more book project. I am painting this one with DIY paint and gravel road, and then I'm using the IOD rose toile stamp. So I like to turn the stamp upside down and then put the ink pad on it. Once you put the stamp down, you don't want to move it. You want to press firmly and then just give it like a little tickle with your fingers and then pull straight back up again. This is one of my favorite stamps. Next, I'm going to use the new Brooch mold. You want to dust your molds with cornstarch and dump out the excess. I'm using the air dry clay. It molds really well. I'm going to turn it upside down and pull it out. Now, a little bit of glue. I love the Tight Bond glue, and I'm spreading it around with a popsicle stick. Make sure you get those edges because the clay will shrink as it dries, so it's important. Now I'm using the new Country Manor stamp right in the middle. I love the way my projects turned out. The inlays worked out so perfectly. I added a little bit of gold, and look how amazing that looks with the dark wax. Some of these projects have already sold at Artisan Peacock, but you can stop by locally and see more, or you can get all of these products online with me. I hope this was fun for you. I enjoyed it. Complete list of all the supplies I used in the description down below. Thanks for watching. If you like this, please like and subscribe and leave me a comment or feedback.